This couple took a 9-month-old up a deadly frozen mountain. YouTube. https://www.youtube.com/watch?mark v=mrrznx_5u9 q transcript 00:00. In today's episode, we're going to look at a couple who took a 9-month-old up a deadly frozen mountain. From a bright fall morning meant for photos and family memories to a mountainside where the weather turned brutally fast, trapping them in a battle against forces far stronger than they ever imagined. 0018. This isn't just a cautionary tale, it's a story of a simple day out that became the last chapter of a once wonderful family. It was October 15, 2017 at Mount Katahdin in Maine. The morning started with partly cloudy skies, temperatures around 45 degrees Fahrenheit and what looked like perfect conditions for a family hike. 0041. Mount Katahdin, standing at 5,267 feet, is Maine's highest peak in the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. Known for its unpredictable weather patterns, the mountain creates its own weather systems due to its isolated position and significant elevation gain from the surrounding terrain. The mountain's granite peaks rise dramatically from the surrounding lowlands, creating a natural barrier that can trap and intensify weather systems with little warning. What makes Katahdin particularly dangerous is its position as an isolated massif, a standalone mountain that rises abruptly from relatively flat terrain. Unlike mountains and ranges, where weather patterns are moderated by neighboring peaks, Katahdin stands alone, forcing air masses to rise rapidly over its slopes. This orographic lifting effect can turn minor weather disturbances into serious storms within hours. The mountain's weather station regularly records some of the most extreme conditions in the northeast, with wind speeds that have exceeded 231 miles per hour, the highest surface wind speed ever recorded by man. The Appalachian Trail and Hunt Trail were busy with fall foliage seekers, and the forecast showed a chance of snow showers above 4,000 feet. Meteorologists had predicted light to moderate snow, but underestimated how quickly the system would intensify once it hit Katahdin's unique terrain. David Rodriguez was a 29-year-old postal worker from Portland, Maine, who had spent the past year becoming obsessed with adventure parenting after following several family adventure Instagram accounts. Since his wife Sarah had returned to work after maternity leave, he had been planning elaborate family adventures to document their experiences. He was also an amateur photographer who had hiked most of Maine's peaks over the past 5 years and saw this trip as the perfect opportunity to capture fall foliage photos with his family for their Christmas cards. David had been planning this particular hike for weeks, checking weather forecasts obsessively and researching the best photo spots along the trail. Sarah Rodriguez was a 27-year-old nurse from Bangor who had grown up camping with her family in the Maine wilderness. Her father had been a hunting guide, and she'd spent countless weekends as a child exploring the state's mountains and forests. After returning from maternity leave 3 months earlier, she had been pushing for family adventures. Determined to maintain their active lifestyle, Sarah had been researching baby carriers and outdoor gear for months, planning to continue hiking with their infant daughter. Their daughter Lily was a healthy 9-month-old who had been on several short, easy trail walks in good weather. She was an alert, curious baby who seemed to enjoy being outdoors, often falling asleep peacefully in her carrier during their previous hiking adventures. The family had planned what they thought was a simple 4-mile round-trip hike to Chimney Pond, well within their comfort zone and perfect for getting those Instagram-worthy family photos that David had been envisioning. But would this simple hike prove to be anything but simple on a mountain known for claiming lives even in good weather? At Katahdin Stream Campground that morning, a seasoned ranger named Mike Thompson mentioned that weather above treeline could change rapidly and suggested they stick to lower elevation trails with the baby. Thompson had worked in Baxter State Park for over 15 years and had seen too many families get caught off guard by Katahdin's notorious weather swings. What the ranger knew but didn't fully emphasize to avoid seeming alarmist was that Katahdin has one of the most severe weather reputations in the Northeast. With conditions that can shift from pleasant to life-threatening in under an hour, the mountain experiences harsh weather over 200 days per year. With sudden temperature drops and wind gusts that can exceed 60 miles per hour, even during milder seasons, Katahdin's treeline sits at approximately 3,500 feet. Meaning that once hikers climb above this elevation, they're exposed to the full force of whatever weather the mountain can generate. The exposed ridges and lack of shelter above treeline make it particularly dangerous when storms move in, creating a natural wind tunnel effect that can knock experienced hikers off their feet. Sarah dismissed the ridges' concerns, noting that they weren't planning to reach the summit, just the pond. She had hiked to Chimney Pond twice before in her early 20s and remembered it as a relatively easy, well-marked trail. The forecast had mentioned snow showers above 4,000 feet, with meteorologists expecting moderate accumulation, well above their planned destination at 2,914 feet, 0524. What Sarah didn't fully appreciate was how much more challenging any hike becomes when you're responsible for an infant's safety and warmth. David's brother Mark, an experienced hiker who had summited Caden multiple times, had texted that morning suggesting they wait a week due to an incoming cold front, but David never read the message until later, 5:45. He was too focused on the perfect photo opportunity in front of them and had left his phone in the car to avoid distractions during their family adventure. Other hikers at the trailhead were commenting on how quickly the weather seemed to be changing, with several groups deciding to turn back or choose shorter, lower elevation hikes, but the Rodriguez family was already committed. They had driven 3 hours from Portland, booked a campsite, and David had taken the day of work specifically for this hike. They started at 10 a.m., with Lily secured in a high-end hiking baby carrier on David's back. The carrier was designed for serious outdoor adventures with extra padding, weather protection, and storage compartments for baby supplies. The weather was pleasant initially, 50 degrees Fahrenheit and partly sunny, with light winds that rustled the colorful autumn leaves. They made good time on the well-maintained trail, stopping frequently for photos and to check on Lily, who seemed to be enjoying the adventure, pointing at birds and reaching for colorful leaves. The fall colors were spectacular, with brilliant reds, oranges and yellows creating a natural cathedral along the trail. David was getting exactly the shots he'd envisioned, capturing candid moments of Sarah pointing out wildlife to Lily and scenic vistas with his family in the foreground. Katahdin's diverse ecosystem was on full display as they climbed, from the mixed hardwood forests at lower elevations where maple, birch and oak trees created a canopy of color to the increasingly sparse vegetation as they climbed higher toward the alpine zone. The trail wound through sections of dense forest, across wooden bridges over rushing streams, and past massive granite boulders left behind by ancient glaciers. The mountain's geological history spans over 400 million years, with its granite core formed deep within the Earth's crust and later exposed through millions of years of erosion. These same geological processes created the dramatic cirques, sharp ridges and deep valleys that make Katahdin both beautiful and dangerous. By noon, at 2,000 feet elevation, the first signs of trouble appeared. The temperature had dropped noticeably to 35 degrees Fahrenheit and light snow began falling. Not the gentle flurries they might have expected, but more persistent precipitation that began sticking to the ground and vegetation. What had started as a few scattered flakes quickly became more persistent, and the wind began picking up, causing the snow to swirl and reducing visibility. This elevation puts hikers in Katahdin's transition zone, where the mountain's weather effects begin to intensify. The terrain here funnels air masses upward, accelerating cooling and precipitation as moisture-laden air is forced to rise rapidly. Other hikers were turning back, including a group of college students who had started the trail an hour before the Rodriguez family. Several hikers warned them about deteriorating conditions ahead, mentioning that the wind was picking up significantly at higher elevations. But the family was only 1.5 meters from their destination. They had come so far, invested so much time and energy in this adventure, and Chimney Pond was supposed to be the highlight of their trip, the perfect spot for the family photos that would capture this milestone in their lives. Sarah adjusted her jacket as the wind picked up and pulled Lily's hood more securely over her head. She insisted they could handle the light snow and continue to their destination, but as they climbed higher into Katahdin's notorious weather-making zone, would just a little snow stay that way? The mountain had already begun to show its true nature, and the family was about to learn why experienced hikers treat Katahdin with such respect and caution. At Chimney Pond, conditions deteriorated with shocking speed. The storm system had intensified far beyond what meteorologists had predicted, demonstrating exactly why Katahdin is considered one of the most dangerous mountains in the eastern United States. The mountain's position creates a natural funnel for weather systems, and its elevation gain of over 4,000 feet from base to summit means hikers can experience multiple climate zones in a single day. Chimney Pond itself sits in a glacial cirque, a B-shaped depression carved by ancient ice that acts like a natural amphitheater for weather. Cold air settles in the cirque and can be trapped there, while winds from above create downdrafts that can suddenly intensify storms. Within an hour of reaching the pond, the wind had picked up to over 40 miles per hour, creating a howling sound that made normal conversation difficult. The temperature had plummeted to 25 degrees Fahrenheit, and the light snow had become a heavy driving storm that stung their faces and made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The cirque's walls, rising steeply on three sides, created a wind tunnel effect that accelerated the storm's intensity. What meteorologists hadn't predicted was how the mountain's unique topography would trap and intensify the weather system, turning a moderate snow shower into a life-threatening blizzard. What had been a pleasant family hike became a survival situation faster than anyone could process. Lily was crying, not her usual fussy cry, but a distressed wail that cut through the wind and snow. Both parents recognized they were facing conditions far beyond what they had prepared for. David's expensive camera gear was quickly packed away as survival became the only priority. Tom Bradley, an experienced hiker from New Hampshire who had been descending from a high elevation, encountered the family at the pond. Bradley was a 45-year-old emergency room physician who had been hiking in New England for over 20 years and immediately recognized the danger the family was in. Bradley later recalled seeing the family struggling with the conditions, the baby crying and both parents beginning to show signs of panic. He immediately advised them that they needed to descend immediately, recognizing that the storm was becoming genuinely dangerous. Bradley had seen the weather deteriorate rapidly during his own hike and had made the decision to descend quickly rather than continue to his planned destination. His experience told him that conditions were becoming dangerous, and seeing a family with an infant in this situation triggered every protective instinct he had as both a hiker and a medical professional. During the descent, visibility dropped to less than 50 feet, creating a disorienting whiteout effect that made navigation treacherous. The trail markers became harder to spot through the driving snow, and the familiar path they had climbed just hours earlier now looked completely different under its coating of fresh snow. While the main trail to Chimney Pond is generally straightforward, the deteriorating conditions made even familiar landmarks unrecognizable. Every tree, rock and trail junction looked the same in the swirling snow. Sarah, who was leading the way down because of her familiarity with the trail, missed a crucial trail marker in the whiteout conditions. The marker, normally clearly visible, was obscured by blowing snow and the reduced visibility. Instead of staying on the main path, she led them toward what appeared to be a continuation of the trail, but was actually a steep ravine area that dropped off sharply from the main route. In good conditions, the mistake would have been obvious, but in the storm, the terrain all looked the same. When they realized they were lost, panic began to set in. Sarah tried to backtrack along what she thought was the trail, but in the whiteout conditions, everything looked the same. The snow was falling steadily, beginning to obscure their footprints and eliminate any chance of following their own tracks back to safety. The wind was creating drifts that changed the landscape minute by minute, making navigation even more challenging. She stepped onto what appeared to be solid ground, a rocky ledge covered with wet leaves and a thin layer of fresh snow that concealed its unstable edge. The ledge had been weakened by the freeze-thaw cycles of early winter, and the combination of moisture, her weight and the loose rock caused the edge to give way beneath her feet. This type of rock failure is common on Katahdin, where the granite bedrock is constantly being fractured by temperature changes and ice formation. Would this be the moment that turned a family adventure into an unthinkable tragedy? Bradley later recalled hearing a crack, then a scream, then silence. He had been following their tracks, worried about the family's safety and trying to guide them back to the main trail. When he reached the source of the sound, he could see that Sarah had fallen through what looked like solid ground. David was at the edge calling her name, but she wasn't responding. The baby was screaming in distress. Sarah had fallen 15 feet onto the rocks in the stream bed below, her body striking multiple surfaces during the fall. She suffered severe head trauma and a broken back, injuries that would have been serious in any circumstances, but were potentially fatal in the current conditions. She was conscious but couldn't move her legs and was rapidly becoming hypothermic in the 32-degree Fahrenheit water that was flowing through the rocky channel. The snow continued to fall heavily and the wind was creating near whiteout conditions even in the sheltered ravine, making rescue attempts extremely dangerous. David, still carrying Lily in the baby carrier, tried desperately to climb down to Sarah using tree roots and rocks along the ravine wall. The carrier made his movements awkward and dangerous, but he couldn't bear to leave Lily alone in the storm. He managed to reach Sarah after several terrifying minutes of climbing, but quickly realized he couldn't get her out alone. She was too badly injured to move, and the rocky walls of the stream bed were too steep and slippery to climb while carrying a baby. Every attempt to lift or move, Sarah caused her to cry out in pain, and it became clear that moving her without proper equipment could cause even more damage. Sarah's condition was deteriorating rapidly, the water was soaking through her clothes and hypothermia was setting in. Her speech was becoming slurred and her movements were becoming sluggish. Classic signs of severe cold exposure. Her nursing training told her that her injuries were severe, possibly fatal, and she repeatedly urged David to take Lily and leave her behind. Bradley climbed to higher ground where he managed to get a weak cell signal after several attempts and called 911. But the news was devastating. The dispatcher explained that rescue teams couldn't reach them safely in the current conditions. They would have to wait for the storm to ease. The wind was too strong for helicopter rescue, with gusts exceeding 50 miles per hour that would make flying extremely dangerous. Ground teams couldn't navigate safely in the whiteout conditions, with the rapidly accumulating snow making trails treacherous and potentially deadly for rescuers. The nearest medical facility was in Milano, about 30 minutes away in good conditions, but the remote location in severe weather meant rescue operations would take significantly longer. The main warden service would need to assemble a team, gather specialized equipment, and wait for conditions to improve enough to attempt a safe rescue. A process that could take hours. David faced an impossible choice that no parent should ever have to make. Sarah was badly injured and becoming hypothermic in the freezing water, her condition deteriorating by the minute. Lily was getting cold despite being bundled up in the carrier, and the storm showed no signs of letting up. The temperature was continuing to drop and the wind was making the effective temperature even colder. Sarah, despite her pain and growing confusion from hypothermia, kept urging him to leave with Lily. Her nursing training told her that her injuries were severe, possibly fatal, and she couldn't bear the thought of Lily suffering because of her accident. Bradley later recalled David's anguish at having to make this decision, but both he and Sarah continued to insist that he needed to get Lily to safety. As a medical professional, Bradley recognized that Sarah's injuries were likely fatal, but he couldn't voice this assessment directly. David made the agonizing decision to leave Sarah with his jacket and emergency blanket while he carried Lily back to find help. Guided by Bradley, he wrapped Sarah as best he could, kissed her forehead, and promised he would come back with help. It was a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life, but in that moment it was the only choice that might save his daughter. Sarah managed to squeeze his hand weakly before he prepared to leave. The journey back to the trailhead took 4 hours in deteriorating conditions that tested every ounce of their endurance and survival skills. Bradley used his GPS and compass to navigate, while David focused on keeping Lily warm and calm. The baby had stopped crying and was becoming dangerously quiet, a sign that hypothermia was setting in. David opened his jacket and held her against his chest, sharing his body heat while Bradley broke trail through the deepening snow. They had to stop frequently to check their direction and warm Lily, rubbing her hands and feet to maintain circulation. Bradley, drawing on his medical training, monitored both David and the baby for signs of hypothermia and frostbite. The wind was relentless, cutting through their clothing and making every step a struggle. Several times they lost the trail completely and had to backtrack, precious time slipping away while Sarah lay injured and alone in the ravine. By the time they reached the parking area, Lily was hypothermic but stable, her core temperature dangerously low but not life-threatening. David was suffering from severe frostbite on his hands and feet, his extremities white and numb from the cold and the stress of the situation, but his only concern was getting help back to Sarah. He provided the rescue teams with detailed directions to the ravine and urged them to hurry. Main Warden Service rescue teams were finally able to reach Sarah 3 hours after her fall, once the worst of the storm had passed and they could safely navigate the treacherous terrain. The delay was caused by the need to wait for conditions to improve enough for safe rescue operations. Attempting a rescue in the whiteout conditions would have risked additional lives without significantly improving Sarah's chances of survival. The rescue team, led by Warden Sergeant Jim Morrison, included experienced mountain rescue specialists with specialized equipment for technical rescues. They rappelled into the ravine using ropes and anchors, working quickly but carefully to stabilize Sarah and prepare her for evacuation. But they were too late. She had died from hypothermia and her injuries approximately 2 hours earlier, alone in the rocky streambed as the snow continued to fall around her. Morrison later reported that Sarah appeared peaceful, with no signs of struggle or panic. The hypothermia would have made her drowsy and she would have lost consciousness gradually without significant suffering. Lily recovered fully with no lasting physical effects, though she spent 2 days in the hospital for observation and treatment of mild hypothermia. David moved back in with his parents and never hiked again. The decision to leave Sarah behind, even though it was the right choice that saved his daughter's life, continues to haunt him. Today, David keeps Sarah's hiking boots by the front door of his parents' house. When Lily, now a toddler, sees them, she points and attempts to put them on, her small feet swimming in the adult-sized boots. She's already showing signs of wanting to explore the outdoors, which both terrifies and comforts David as he tries to figure out how to honor Sarah's adventurous spirit while keeping their daughter safe. Thanks for watching. Want to watch more?